1 Corinthians 13, verses 1 to 13. If I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy, and can fathom all mysteries and all of knowledge, and I can have faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor, and give over my body to hardship, that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast. It is not proud, it does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrong. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices in the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, and always preserves. Love never fails, but where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be still. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. We know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when completeness comes, what is in part disappears. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child, and I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. Now we see only a reflection as in a mirror, then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. And now these three things remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of all of these is love.
In week 1, we looked at that amazing reminder to keep our eyes and our hearts focused on our first love. Not to get caught up with all the other things that our faith can become about. And we found, and I think all of us probably reflected that we're here that Sunday, it is hard not to get caught in the traps of modern Christianity, of looking at things like attendance or trying to gauge our success, but instead to root ourselves in keeping our eyes focused on Jesus. Last week we looked at that unbelievable passage in John 3:16, so well known, but dare I still say, maybe not so well grasped. A passage that speaks of the true depth of love that God has for each of us, for you. And that love expressed through sending Jesus to earth. Again, we stood both of those messages alongside that passage from Paul's letter to 1 Corinthians that we heard earlier from Tamar. And then last week we added to all of those truths, all of those things that we read, this understanding of what that love was. Agape. That root love, that deep love, that selfless love, that giving love. Again, all three of those passages were using this same expression of love. This series on love does not boil down to those fluffy teddies and sickly cards that we associate so often with love. It doesn't boil down to the way we maybe say, I love this or I love that. This is a deeper understanding of love that as God's people we need to grasp, because it affects the very core of who we are when we take hold of this truth. Because this is the kind of love that can change a life. It will change communities, and I honestly believe it's the kind of love that sadly we need to see in this world today, because it can bring about change. Remember your first love. For God so loved the world. And now we move on to this, our third and final week, and this becomes the so what? So what? What does it mean for us to grasp that God loves us? What does it mean for us to keep our eyes fixed on Jesus? How does all of that we speak of in here mix with the lives we lead Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and so on? How does it go beyond the four walls of this building? The truth is, as people of faith, as Christians, it's very nice to know we are loved. It makes us feel warm and fluffy inside. And it's nice for us to be able to fix our eyes on Jesus, because when everything else falls apart, it's good to have that steadfast focus. But why? But why is that so important? And what is next? How do these truths change anything other than that feeling we have inside? And that's what we're going to tackle this morning. So I'm going to invite Kath to come and read the first passage for us today. Thank you, Kath.
It's in John 13 and verses 34 and 35. A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another.
Thank you, Kath. Kath will be back in a moment. Love one another. I mean, at this point, it's probably safe to say things have got very real. Because it's really nice to know that God loves me. And it's really easy for me to fix my eyes on Jesus. Both of those things are me. I can cut all of you out of that process, and I can focus on those two truths. And then Jesus drops this in. Love one another. No longer is this a simply isolating love. No longer is this solely an internal focus. These words of Jesus mean that every single thing we hear about love and everything we see of Jesus now has to be lived amongst community. Not just those we like, but amongst community. What do we do with the knowledge of God's love for us? We love one another. Why do we focus our eyes on Jesus? So that we can love one another. And just before we move on, just so you're aware, we're not mixing our Greek here. Again, the word Jesus uses for love is agape. God loved you so much, he sent his son to earth. And Jesus says that level of love, show that level of love to one another. Paul tells us that love is patient and love is kind. Love doesn't count up wrongs. It doesn't delight in wrongdoing and evil and just focuses on the positives. That's the love Jesus tells us to have for one another. Anyone who is going to work tomorrow morning will know that that is an incredibly difficult thing to do with some of your colleagues. And yet that's what Jesus asks us to be doing. The problem with this is it stops us simply feeling like by dropping a few pound coins into a charity box as we walk past, maybe smiling at a few people or giving a gift at Christmas, we realize this is deeper. This has to mean more. It has to outwork more into our lives. I've said it time and time again across the last 2 Sundays, and I'll say it again today. I genuinely believe if we could grasp just a tiny bit more of what God means by his love for us and what Jesus means by calling us to love one another, we would see incredible change in our lives. And we would see an incredible impact in the communities in which we live. If we could just grasp a bit more of love. But before we go on, and those of you who like to pick out points and faults, this is not a contradiction to week 1. Week 1, where I challenged us not to get caught up on looking at all we do. Those of you who were here will remember that fictional report card we got from BUW telling us how excellent we were doing. It's not getting hung up on that. This isn't a contradiction telling us now we need to start gauging all of those things. You see, we're called to love one another, not to earn God's love. Because as we heard last week, that's already there for us in abundance. We're not doing this to earn God's love. And loving one another is the why of what we do. Because the why of what we do is still that love we have for Jesus, that focus we have on him. You see, what this is, and it's why it comes together in my head so well, this is the overflow. This is the that plus that equals this. The overflow of knowing how much God loves me is that I can love others. The focus I have on Jesus and the love I have for him means that I cannot do anything on my day-to-day business without love overflowing into my relationships with others, the way I see others, the way I treat others. If we take seriously the words that Jesus speaks in this passage, then we are left at a very deliberate crossroads. And that crossroads is, do I accept God's love for me? Will I focus my eyes on Jesus so fully that the only possible response is that it overflows into my heart? That I cannot hold in that knowledge of love without it overflowing into the lives of those around me. Love one another. Jesus is calling us to be a people of action. This is a passage of action. An action of loving defiance. And Jesus, being Jesus, helps us to understand what that will look like. So I'm going to invite Kath to come again and read for us. Thank you, Kath.
John 13, verses 1 to 17. Jesus washes his disciples' feet. It was just before the Passover festival. Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. The evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel round his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped round him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus replied, "You do not realize now what I am doing, but later you will understand." "No," said Peter, "you shall never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no part with me." "Then, Lord," Simon Peter replied, "not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well." Jesus answered, "Those who have had a bath need only to wash their feet. Their whole body is clean, and you are clean, though not every one of you." For he knew who was going to betray him, and that was why he said not everyone was clean. When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. "Do you understand what I have done for you?" he asked them. "You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you should also wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly, I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them." Amen.
Thank you. Jesus, being Jesus, doesn't simply just tell us to love one another. He examines. His entire ministry is built around this understanding of not simply just telling us what to do. Those of you again who were here the other week would have heard that line that he gives. Listen to the teaching of the Pharisees and do it, but do not do what they do. For they do not live out what they teach. And yet we see in Jesus the opportunity to hear what we are told to do, and then we are exampled what it is we are to do, a complete teaching, a complete outworking. And here we have this moment, Jesus, the Son of God, who will go to the cross because of the love he has for you, sets the example of humble, active, impacting, practical love. I told you, if the church could grasp even a little bit more of what love really says to us about God, about how he views you, and about what he calls us to do with it, it would change the lives of those around us. It really would. It would impact our communities. It would have an impact on the world in which we live. As I said, this whole little series was birthed out of a message that Mark brought, and as I spent the last month or so just pondering it, I had an amazing opportunity to see something of today's message in action. One of the most privileged and blessed times I've had in the last few months, and some of you were there, was the Eden Gate Thanksgiving service. Why? That evening we heard stories and testimonies of a Christian organization loving, of a Christian organization extending a hand of love to those the world had forgotten, avoided, and in some circumstances deliberately traumatized. That evening I saw expressions of love in action. And the stories that were told were so humble. People who were sleeping rough, just wanting a safe space, somewhere they could get some toast with some jam, where they could wash their clothes, and probably most importantly, where they were seen as a person. It was an incredibly privileged time to sit there. The problem was I sat there hugely aware of the areas within my life, a church leader, where I do not live out that kind of life. Where I support projects like Eden Gate to make me feel better at times about my lack of activity. And yet I sit there with this passage from Jesus, understanding that those two things do not marry up. If I am a disciple of Christ, I need to hear his teaching and watch his example. And his example is to be active, to be personally engaged. I was challenged immensely that evening, and it leaves us all with this question: what can we do? What can I do about that challenge that we face? Let's just take a few points from that second reading that Kath brought us. It was just before the Passover festival. Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. This is such a throwaway point at the start of this passage, and yet I would beg to say it may be one of the most significant, because this context lays out everything that's about to come. Jesus knows his time on earth is coming to an end. This is his crescendo. This is the big moment. This is the final piece. This is the opportunity for him to give that rousing speech, to do something just before he goes. Time is of the essence. This is the moment that we read this passage in this context. There would be an encore, that would be 3 days after the cross, but Jesus knew this was a crucial teaching opportunity. You add to that what we read again. Jesus knew the Father had put all things under his power and that he had come from God and was returning to God. Jesus, fully aware of the power in which he possessed in that moment and the knowledge that his time on earth was coming to an end, had a golden opportunity to give the disciples something to run with. This is the I have a dream speech kind of moment for Jesus. Stand on the table, Jesus. Make it good. What does he do? The Son of God, the Word at the beginning, God incarnate, wonderful Counselor, Prince of Peace. What does he do with these precious moments? He got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. One of the most pressing moments in Jesus' ministry, one of the most time-aware periods that he has. A golden opportunity with those who knew him most intimately, those who would call him Messiah. And what does he do with that moment? He takes the humble posture of a servant. He takes the posture of a servant and he washes their dirty, stinky, dusty feet. Jesus, the Son of God, the Word at the beginning, God incarnate, is on his knees before mere mortals, and he washes their feet. Jesus, with limited time left on earth and a full awareness of his power through that relationship with God and being God on earth, what does he do in that moment? He washes their feet. To love as Jesus loved is to serve others. Love one another. How? To love as Jesus loved is to serve others, is to see the needs of others and to meet them. And this moment changes everything for us, because to love others as we are taught by Jesus is to remember that no one is below our act of service to them. Because Jesus, who is above each and every one of us, served those who were lower than him. His example changes everything. The get out free jail card has gone up in flames. The I'm not good enough card falls short. The excuses will fall silent. This act changes everything. This act of loving people. That's what will set us apart from the rest of the world. That's what will define us as his followers. When he finished washing their feet, he put his clothes on and returned to his place. Do you understand what I've done for you? He asked them. You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you should also wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done. Very truly I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor a messenger greater than the one who sent him. And then just that reminder of the words that Kath brought us at the beginning. A new command I give to you, love one another as I have loved you. So you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. This moment in its intensity and its positioning in the life cycle of Jesus means we have to sit up and pay attention. We have to understand the magnitude of what Jesus has done in this moment. And yet this is a common conversation that I will have with other people and other ministers. How many services do you run on a Sunday now? Post-COVID, have you gone back to evening meetings? How many people are in your congregation? How's your membership? Do people still come out to the prayer meetings that you hold? How many union councils do you represent now? Do you guys do a community carol service? The big one. Do those who come to Messy Church actually come to like proper church on a Sunday morning? You know, I've never once been asked by any other minister, and I've done this now for 8 years, and I've been involved in church my entire life. Never once have I been asked, how does your church love its community? Never once. Never once have I been asked, what acts of love do you guys show to your community? Not what do you put on, not how well is it attended. What acts of love do you guys show to your community? Why are we not asking, when the community looks at your church, what do they see? Do they see love lived out? Jesus tells us it's what will set us apart from the rest of the world, the way we love. And yet we have not got it as a priority in our to-do lists. Love in action is what we are called to do. How will anyone know I'm a disciple of Christ? Will it be how many Bible verses I know off by heart? Will it be by which leaders I listen to or associate with? No. How well I can pray? Do I know the Lord's Prayer off by heart? No. How will this world know that I am a disciple of Christ? The practical love I live out in my life. That's what sets us apart. That's what will define us. That's the legacy we should be striving after. Because the absolute truth is this, and I'm sorry to break it to you, but the world does not care one bit about what we talk about. Why would it? You know what it cares about? How we live our lives out there. That's what they care about now. Ask anyone involved in ICE. Most children have zero comprehension of the Bible. They don't know the Bible stories that we take for granted. So how do we teach them? We give them the opportunity to hear the stories through the work of ICE. But for their parents, we go and model love. Be a person other people are drawn to. Leave them wanting to know, why are you patient? Why are you kind? And why are you forgiving? And why are you graceful? Why do you do what you do? How do you love like that? Let me tell you. Because he first loved me. The outpouring of our understanding of who God is and his love for us has to be active. The overflow of it needs to pour into our daily lives every single day. And the truth is this, it doesn't really matter to me how uncomfortable this preach makes you feel. It does not matter. Because it will be more uncomfortable to explain to Jesus why you felt you could avoid loving other people, when his command is clear for his followers to love one another. This isn't just something that I brought together and made up. This isn't just some collaboration Mark and I have about trying to make this church more loving. These are the red letters of Jesus telling us the defining feature of my people will be love. That's what will define love. Jesus took a towel and a bowl and he knelt before those who would scatter at the first sign of trouble. Those who would doubt his resurrection, those who would betray him, the one who would betray him, the one who would react with violence, the ones who would make mistakes and fall, because he knew the most powerful thing that he has was love. It was love that had drawn him to earth, and it was love that would send him to the cross. So in this moment, he examples love to them. Irrelevant of the shortfallings he was aware of, irrelevant of the act that was about to send him to the cross, he washed their feet. There is no excuse I could find, and I've tried, to not love someone when we watch this act of Jesus. They're going to throw it back in my face. Jesus, I'm now before Jesus. It's going to mean nothing to them. I need something concrete. We see it over and over again, those moments where we manage to make excuses, and yet Jesus knelt before them. He could have taught them theology in that moment. He could have given them a surefire way to cast out demons. He could have anointed them with oil. He could have taught them a new Lord's Prayer. He could have given them a staff like Moses that would turn into a snake. He could have done so much, and yet what do we see him do? Love. In the most intimate way. By serving them through washing their feet. No rousing speech. Instead, the posture of humble service. To show each and every one of them and every person in here what love lived out looks like. So the question we're left with is, what can I do next to love the world around me on that kind of level? What can I do next to love those in my community on that kind of level? What can I do next to love my family on that kind of level? Because we are at a crossroads now. We need to decide whether we take on board the command that Jesus gives us to love others at that level, or we walk away from it. We somehow take all that we know of God's love for us and we allow it not to act. We focus our eyes on Jesus and understand that moment that we first encountered him and decide, you know what, that was a wonderful spiritual high, but life's changed. So it's going to dilute down. So I suppose I'll ask this. When we strip away the music, we take away the speaking, when we delete all the events from our calendars, when we take away our clever thinking and our educations, when we take off the crosses around our necks, when we shut the doors of the chapel and turn off the lights, what will we be left with? What will we be left with when all of that strips away? Will it be love?